Hello, and welcome to
Bell on Earth.
My name is Cassidy,
My name is Casey.
and together we are the Bell Sisters. Join us each week as we corrupt your soul,
And bring you to salvation.
discussing life, death, and everything in between.
Are you afraid of getting into heaven?
We're back.
Hello.
So we're just going to jump right into this next part of this discussion, which is what in part one we took down veganism, and in part two we're going to take down carnivores.
Fuck the vegans. Fuck the carnivores.
As this ice cream truck is playing in the background, I think it's a perfect
Kind of
time
iconic.
to take down the carnivores.
Yeah.
So, in this section, I wanted to talk about some of the arguments against carnivorism, because there is like a large percentage of people who are now switching to like full carnivorism.
Like those like raw meat diets.
Oh my god, it's so gross. And this is where I'm like, I sort of agree with the vegans more on this. Like,
Let's be real. It's like less annoying to be a vegan than a full carnivore.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
like embarrassing to be a full carnivore. Like, what are you doing?
Also, look who's on your side, like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson. Like, is that who you want to?
Are they really on their side though?
Yeah, they're or
I
at
don't
least
think they're full carnivores.
that's what they say.
Really?
Yeah, they are on the carnivore diet where they don't eat any vegetables. They just eat. It's literally like butter, meat, seafood, and I think that's like it.
All right, starting a countdown for like 5 years, they're both gonna be fucking dead.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's so unhealthy to fully eat just meat. Now, again, like, do I think that eating meat can, like, how do I explain this? I think that eating meat is not necessarily a bad thing overall. Like, I do think that there can be ethical consumption of meat, and I also do think that ultimately, like, there are people who do need to eat meat, and it can be very healthy if you do it correctly, but, I mean, overall, like, a lot of our diet is oversaturated with meat, and it's just not healthy to consume so much of it all the time, both on an environmental level and on a health level. Like, I do kind of side a lot more with, at least, like, plant-based diets where maybe like some of your meals are meat and most of them have a lot more veggies and like whole foods. This is something that in college when I was doing my final essay on, I was doing it on like, oh my gosh.
You don't even remember your own essay.
I do remember, I forget exactly
Fake
what it
student.
was. I know, it was so long ago, I'm so old.
Oh my god.
This is the vegan diet. Working.
You're not getting your nutrients in.
Yeah. But basically I did an essay about like the diet of American children specifically, and a lot of American children are micronutrient deficient. And that includes like vitamins, minerals, things like that, because they're not consuming enough vegetables and fruits. They're consuming way too much meat, and it's not healthy. It's not healthy to overconsume meat, just the same way that it's not always healthy to necessarily just consume vegetables. You have to be, if you're going to be vegan, you have to do it correctly, and you have to do it sustainably. But in the same way, it's a lot easier to be healthy on a vegan diet than it is to be on a carnivore diet. Like, let's just be fucking for real.
And just in general, like, not for nothing, but look at, like, school cafeterias and even, like, the fruit and vegetables that they're serving. Like, yeah, sometimes they'll have, like, the apples and bananas, but otherwise it'll be, like, fruit cups and, like, vegetables doused in butter and, like, shit like that. And, like, even the fruits and veggies that they're being served are not necessarily healthy options.
Yeah. I remember in our middle school, the apples were bouncy. Like, you could bounce them like a ball. It was
I do
wild.
remember that.
Wild. Well, I mean, even the milk was spoiled there.
Yeah.
So bizarre. But anyway, again, like...
Deep sigh.
Yeah, deep sigh. I think when it comes to carnivorism, like, it's not necessarily any healthier or better to overconsume meat like that. Like, it's very high in saturated fats, and you can't sustainably get all of the nutrients that the human body needs to, like, function in a fully meat diet. Like, you really do have to have both. It's not possible.
Yeah.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting when I was doing research for this episode, when I was looking at the carnivore diet, a lot of people will call to the Native American, specifically Inuit people, who do eat a very heavy meat-based diet. And what I think is really interesting about this is there's a couple things that I think are really interesting. Number one, I think that because vegans will also call them out and say, like, well, they have a very meat-based diet. That's their culture. They've been living like that for 1,000 years. Or, I'm sorry, way longer than 1,000 years, for a millennium. They've been living like that. So leave people alone. Number two, I can't say this for all Native Americans, but specifically in Inuit culture and in a lot of different indigenous peoples' cultures, like, that's kind of the whole thing, is that you work with the land and you have a symbiotic relationship where, like, Jordan Peterson's not, like, going up to a cow and saying thank you and then, like, using the whole cow, right? Like, he's just consuming the meat. That's not ethical, and it's not healthy. Whereas in Inuit culture, maybe they are eating full, like, seals or whales, but they're using the entire animal. They're using the pelts. They're using the blubber. They're using the liver. And that's where a lot of their nutrients come from, is from the organ meat and from other parts of the animal. And again, they're using the full animal in order to, like, be respectful to the environment, because their understanding is that, like, the environment provided for them, and so they're going to be respectful. Whereas I think a lot of people that go onto this, like, raw meat, like, carnivore paleo diet don't actually respect the environment, and they're not getting the, like, meat themselves, right? Like, not that I necessarily support hunting, but if you're gonna sit there and say, like, oh, the Inuit people get their meat like this, like, then go and do it like the Inuit people.
And I think, like, because I think a lot of people find certain arguments to be very, what is the word I'm looking for? Like, hippy-dippy, kind of, in terms of, like, oh, well, people will say, you know, like, the meat is going to be healthier if you're, like, respecting the animal, and people, like, think that's bullshit. But, like, think of it from, like, a scientific standpoint. Like, first of all, if you have animals that are in a crazy stressful environment, like, they're not going to be producing, like, healthy meat. It's going to be full of, like, stressful hormones. Like, the meat is going to be, like, just not as nutrient dense. Just put, like, a human in that kind of circumstance. Like, when you're in a super stressful environment, like, your cortisol rises, like, you're not processing things properly, like, you're not healthy. You're not physically
a tasty human.
Exactly.
Delicioso.
Yeah. But it's true. Like, you're just not going to be in proper health, and that's what happens to animals on these farms, is that they're not in proper health to begin with. They're also being pumped with hormones to make them bigger, and produce more meat, which isn't healthy.
Yeah. And they're also being pumped with antibiotics and stuff like that, because they're
poor diets.
Right, because they're stuffed into these, like, tiny little constricted places, and so they're getting sick more often. So not only are they sick, full of hormones, and being fed poor diets, but they're also, like, stressed out, and that isn't going to produce, like you said, a healthy, strong, like, source of protein or meat.
And if you've ever eaten, like, just an example, eggs. Mm-hmm. If you've ever eaten, like, fully, like, farm, like, eggs, just, like, from, again, like, commercial farms, versus if you've bought it from, like, a farmer's market, or if you have, like, a friend or neighbor who has chickens and, like, you eat their eggs, the eggs are completely different. Yeah. Like, they look different, they taste different, they're different, like, sizes and colors, and, like, they're completely different than what you're buying at the grocery store.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, just in eggs, you can visually see it. Now think of like any other meat that you're eating.
Well, you can even technically visually see it in the majority of meat. They just like put dyes in it to make it look better.
This is true.
But if you actually look at meat before they dye it, like it looks like crap because you're getting it not necessarily from like a crap animal. I don't think that's fair to say about the animal. But you're getting it from animals that are coming from poor conditions.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing, especially with, like, fish. Like, that salmon is all dyed because they're either farming the fish or they're getting it from unethical means. And it's not, like, the true color of salmon.
No,
like,
salmon farming is, like, really disturbing.
Yeah. Well, actually, seafood, like, the entire seafood production is really, really scary and gross and just terrifying.
And from like an ethical standpoint and just from like a consumer standpoint.
Yeah.
Like if you actually saw visually like the conditions that these animals were in, like it's disturbing. And like you honestly, like it's hard because again, like I do eat meat and like sometimes I do almost have to dissociate from some of those conditions just to like feed myself, which is really sad and disturbing. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you kind of like do, because when you actually look at the conditions that these animals are in, it's again not only disturbing for the animal itself but also like for you as the person eating it.
Yeah it's gross. And if you've ever seen, what is it called, Blackfish, or no, well, there is Blackfish. There's another one that just came out semi-recently. I forget what it's called. I'll put it in the show notes so that you can watch it. I'm pretty sure it's just on Netflix. But there was another documentary that came out about the fish farming and fishery, like, industry. And it's so harmful. It's so much worse than meat production. Because, of course, meat production has a lot of the same issues as farming in general. Like, there's deforestation. There is, the issue of methane, there's the issue of space, there's the issue of nutrient deficiency in the soil and stuff like that. And of course, like we've been saying, there's a lot of abuse that comes from not just the animals, but also for the workers. But the fishing industry is so much worse. Like, it's almost a billion times worse. A lot of people, a lot of fishermen are kidnapped. A lot, and they're put on horrible conditions. They're told that they have this opportunity and like literally just kidnapped for years. Sometimes, like, it's insane. And put in really horrific conditions where it's very, very dangerous. Like, the open seas are no fucking joke. No. So you have that. You also have the fact that they'll use nets to like scoop up basically like the fish, and those nets aren't like, they're not looking at the like cute little dolphins or like the cute little sea turtles. Like, they're scooping everything, including the ocean floor, which is destroying the environment. Yeah. Completely destroying the environment and the ecosystem of the entire ocean, not just one ocean or the other ocean. Like, the entire ocean is being destroyed by these nets that they're scraping along the floor, scooping up everything that's in there, and then everything dies, right? So you have a bunch of dolphins, sea turtles, whatever, like all sorts of things in these nets dying, and then they just throw them out, and that's not good for the environment either, because now they're decomposing and you have like tons of death in the ocean.
And they're not repopulating any of these animals as well.
Right, exactly. You're depopulating all of the fish that are now in these nets that you're using to then like mass produce and feed people. And it's incredibly disturbing. And the answer to this that a lot of people had was, well, we'll just farm the fish, right? And so they have these giant nets in the ocean where all of the fish are in one space. They are all deformed because they all have diseases because they're in this tiny little space, just the same way that they do with chickens or cows or whatever, or pigs. They're all in these like tiny little nets. They don't get to swim free. They're all diseased. They're all pumped full of hormones and all sorts of shit. And also all of the shit that they're producing is now going into the ocean. And they're either consuming it themselves or it's like literally like destroying the environment of that specific space where they have these nets and completely killing everything else that's there. So not only are you destroying an entire ecosystem, but you're serving diseased, like, ridden fish to people because I don't know, like everyone needs to have fish, I guess. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's just so disturbing and sad. And it's like, what are you supposed to do at this point when there's literally no way to ethically consume food when you go to the grocery store?
Yeah. And then, like, not for nothing, and this is, like, semi-off topic, but then people do the whole, like, overpopulation argument where, like, people will say, like, I think Joe Rogan has spoken about this on his podcast, where people will argue that, like, no, actually, it's Elon Musk that is, like, a whole proponent of this, that, like, he doesn't believe in overpopulation, and in fact believes that, like, we are declining as a population, which, like, in some ways statistically can be true, but, like, we've been overpopulating for so long that, like, yeah, to stop doing that is going to have an impact, but at the same time, like, that's kind of what we need at this point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We either need to stop producing so many fucking people or find a better way to be producing food for these people so we're not destroying the environment. Because not for nothing, but we are also somehow overproducing food while still having so many people who don't have enough to eat.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much food that's going to waste.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other issue is that you're, like, overproducing all of this food and then allowing people, like, to literally just starve for no reason.
Yeah.
And this is why this ties in so well with antinatalism is the fact that, I don't know, I do agree that, like, the amount of people that we have now is continuously growing, right? And there are some people who are for and against overpopulation. I don't know if I really take a side on either one. Like, I just don't know if I have enough information to pick one or the other. But I do absolutely agree that we are over-consuming and I don't even know the word for this, but just, like, producing so much garbage.
Yeah.
Like, it's so disgusting, like, the amount of garbage that we produce. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. And this is why, like, ethical consumerism is so important to me because, like, we don't need so much stuff. And that includes food. We don't need so much food. We don't need there to be food of all types in the grocery store at all times.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not necessary. And it's kind of disgusting to see how much food we have that, like, half the people of this country and, of course, of the world, but just in this country alone, like, so many people are going hungry, and the fact that we have so much, and they're, like, it's disgusting.
And again,
it's
all
ridiculous.
goes to waste.
Yeah. And now you're killing animals for no reason.
For literally no reason.
They're literally dying for nothing. And being harmed and destroying the planet for no reason.
Well, that's, like, why the whole argument of, like, well, Native Americans, like, do it, like,
yeah,
that in itself is just not a valid argument because, like you're saying, like, they always use everything in regards to the animal when it comes to, like, all parts of it and bones and, like, leather and all that kind of stuff. But then Native Americans will always also understand, like, the environmental impact and will use different areas for farming or only grow things obviously that are going to be in season and work with the, like, environment that they live in. And so it's like,
yeah,
they're not actively harming the fucking environment that they're in.
Yes.
If anything, they're, like, helping it and are a part of it.
Well, they're a part of the ecosystem. Like, that is the entire, like, part, or that's the whole point of having, like, their specific way of living, right? Like,
yeah.
And of course this is very much in terms of, like, people who were, like, part of the ecosystem prior, I think, to, like, colonization and stuff like that. And there's still people who live like this and have those symbiotic relationships, but it isn't as, like, common anymore. Mm-hmm. But anyway, if you look at, like Native American culture, specifically we'll go with Inuit culture because that was the one that came up in the article I was reading. They're, first of all, not over-consuming, right? Like, they are getting the amount of seal or whatever they're getting, right? They're getting the amount to feed their family for a extended period of time.
Yeah.
And they're not eating that seal, like over-consuming the seal, right? Like, they're spreading it out over a certain period of time because they know that, number one, hunting costs a lot of energy, right? Like, going out and hunting and getting food, it's a lot of energy. So they're eating the amount that they need to eat to continue to like function and have energy and whatever, but they're not overeating and over consuming. And like you said, they're also using every single part of that animal and honoring that animal and appreciating the fact that it came like from the earth and giving gratitude to that meal. They're also, like you said, a part of the ecosystem. So instead of creating animals to then eat them, they're hunting animals and dwindling the population so that there's enough animals in that population to sustain itself. Because as we've seen with, for example, deer or rabbits or other types of animals in different ecosystems, they oftentimes overpopulate because they don't have a natural predator anymore. When you just allow deer to populate, they're going to continue to populate. And then
jump into your cars.
And jump into your cars, yeah. But then they, like, destroy the environment, right? Like, they eat all of the food, and then they all die off because there's nothing else to eat. But if you hunt them sustainably, you can control the population and be a part of that ecosystem where then they have enough to eat, you have enough to eat, and everyone's happy, right? Yeah. That's, like, kind of, I think, the move at this point. And I don't know how that would possibly look. Like, I think we've come to a point where it's very, very hard to change what we've done now, and it would take a long time and be a very slow move over to a more symbiotic relationship with the earth. But I think that is something that we all have to strive for, right? Because, like, we cannot continue to consume the way that we are consuming right now. Yeah. It's not going to work out for us. We are destroying the earth that we live on, and we don't even fucking appreciate it. Yeah. Like, I can't even, like, begin to describe the humiliation and embarrassment and disgust that I have for the way that we treat the planet. It's insane and gross. And it's all for a made-up resource that we can just print more of, aka money. Yeah. Right? And whatever, I don't know how the
economists works. Are going to, like, be ravaging us. But, like, let's be real. From, like, a very, very, like, go all the way back with your fucking view. Like, come on. We created money. Yeah. And yes, when it comes to, like, older cultures, even, like, bargaining and stuff like that has existed, but, like, it's still different from the way that we view money now. And, like, the other part of it, obviously, there's plenty of money to go around. It's just being hoarded by certain people and companies. Yes. So that's also part of it, is that we have the ability, we have the resources, it's just that we don't fucking want to.
Right. It's literally not even we. It's a small percentage of the people on this planet want to destroy everyone else for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not going to make claims as to why. I think they honestly are just dumb, but, you know, people have other theories, mainly vegans. But, like, come on. Like, we have the ability to feed everyone. We have the ability to make sure everyone is healthy and happy and provide resources. And also, we have the ability to do all of this while taking care of the planet, and we simply don't.
Yeah. And I think it does kind of come back to, like, a struggling population is going to be easier to manipulate.
Ooh, twinsies.
Oh my god. But, like, unfortunately, like, to keep everyone sick as well, it's just, it makes more money. It's, once again, easier to manipulate, and, like, I think that's kind of the harsh reality of it. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately what it usually comes down to. And I think, well, I don't know. I, like, don't really think there's much of an argument for, like, carnivores.
No, I honestly don't think
to be honest. I think, like, carnivorous diets, like, truly just came out of the reaction to veganism. Yes. And I think that's all it is.
Agreed.
And I think, like, obviously, like, the true argument is whether or not, like, eating meat itself is, like, proper and ethical. And, like, yeah, we fucking know that, like, eating meat itself is not the issue. Right. It's, like, the ethical consumption of it that becomes the issue and becomes like the argumentative point that people try to make.
And the commercialization of it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like that's where it's very frustrating because like obviously there's validity to a lot of it, but at the same time, like, to become so divisive over it is not going to help anyone. And if we actually want to create a better environment for everyone from all different fucking dietary backgrounds, like, we're gonna have to unify in some way and understand that it's not your fault, it's not my fault, it's like the larger picture.
Yeah.
And in order to create a place where we can all consume ethically in any way that we want to, like, we have to stop pointing the blame in places that the blame doesn't need to exist in.
Yes, exactly. Like, pointing fingers at each other is literally not doing anything. Like, you literally just get, like, an ooey-oo face.
I was literally, because Cassidy was, like, doing the finger thing, and, like, we're literally just ooh-wooing at this point.
Like, yeah. That's literally what we are doing. And it's just, like, ridiculous. Like, you stupid fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Okay, not to say that I'm brilliant and smart, but I am, right?
I mean...
But ultimately...
We're not stupid, we're just dumb, and I stand by that.
True. That should be on a t-shirt. Merch coming soon.
It should be tattooed on my fucking brain.
Yeah, it literally is.
It literally is. I say it all the time. Because it's true.
It is true. But anyway, literally the answer to all of this is just community-based living and care, right?
Just talking.
It's
literally just talking to people.
Exactly. But also, like, creating community, because realistically, like, the more that we become a community with each other, the less that we rely on these people who are destroying the planet. Because it's really not you or I who is destroying the planet, right? It's giant corporations that are fracking and doing commercial fishing and all this other stuff and kidnapping people and creating scams and all these other things.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are destroying the planet. And of course, you know, like, on a day-to-day basis, there is certain things that contribute to the carbon footprint, blah, blah. But ultimately, like, driving your car from home to work isn't what's killing everything. It's the bigger, larger picture.
And also, like, even within that, it's like, it's not your fault, it's not my fault that we live in a country, especially, that doesn't really have access to public transportation widespread.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, like, some people can try to make that argument of, like, electric vehicles and blah, 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 but it's like, even with electric vehicles, there's problems environmentally, and, like, really, again, it's not, like, your fault, it's not my fault.
Yeah. I think once we understand that, like, the 98% can come together and actually work together and create a better, sustainable community, like, we'll all be better off at that point.
Yeah.
Will it happen? I don't know. I am hopeful that it will, but ultimately, like, the answer to all of this, again, is community. It's community care. It's taking care of each other. It's providing for each other. It's, you know, trading with each other and limiting our interactions with the larger, like, corporations and that 1%, right? Like, buying from small businesses and creating communities around, like, your neighbors and your friends and your family, lending things to people instead of buying them, right? Like, instead of donating all your shit to the Salvation Army, like, donate to your friends and family who may like it and need it.
Yeah.
It, like, or selling stuff or using buy nothing groups or whatever. Like, there's so much, especially with the internet, like, there's so much ability to create community at this point and learn things and learn how to be more sustainable and more ethical. Like, we can do it. We just have to, like, work together to get it done.
And I think, like, with the advancement of technology, it has become a double-edged sword because it gives us the resource, but it also, like, overwhelms us at the same time. And to be honest, I think, like, the big real issue is that technology has developed and advanced so fast that we haven't really been able to keep up and, like, completely comprehend what's happening. And I feel hopeful with, like, the recent generations that we do start to understand the power that we do have and, like, the ability to connect with each other, even, like, on, like, a community basis and on, like, an international level. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can start to harness that ability and evolve from a, like, not technological, because we've, like, been doing that, we've gotten there, but if we can start to evolve from, like, a mental and, like, philosophical standpoint, then we will start to see improvement, and I think we can, dare I say, like, save civilization.
Yeah.
Because, not to be morbid and pessimistic, but we've all witnessed it. We are kind of going downhill.
Yeah.
But I think we have potential as humans, and I don't know, it's like, it's sad because it's like you have to see the reality of it, but there is a part of me that believes that, like, the reality is also that we can help each other.
I agree. Yeah.
I do have hope.
I have hope too. I think that we have gotten to a really bad point, and I think that at this point in time we have to kind of open our eyes and stop being ignorant and stop pretending like everything's just gonna be okay.
Yeah,
because
it's not.
It's not. And I agree. Like, I definitely do have some, like, pessimism, I guess, but I also have
hard
optimism.
not to.
Yeah, and I think that's being a realist, right? Is
Yeah.
understanding that, like, looking at the world and looking at how people are and seeing it, like, it's kind of hard to be like, everyone's gonna get on board with this, but I do think that a lot of us can, and I think it's possible to shift how things are going. Because ultimately, and this is something that George Carlin said, and this is something I'll say, the earth will always be here, we won't be always be here. So if you actually want to continue living and want to have a better place for your children, if you aren't an antinatalist and child-free, then you actually have to put in the work. Like, That's part of it, right? Like, that's part of being an antinatalist, is seeing how the world is shifting and not wanting to bring kids into it. But if you're going to bring kids into this world and you truly want to, like, have a family, then you have to do your part in creating a better world for the children. Because the children, that's not their responsibility.
Yeah.
It's your responsibility to create a better world for them. So.
And that's where that duality comes in, because, you know, like we're saying, like, it's not your fault, it's not my fault that all this is going on. However, it is, like, still our responsibility to stand up for the planet and for our community and for each other. Yeah. Because nothing's going to change if we continue to let people who, honestly, like, yeah, maybe they have money, but, like we're saying, like, money is not, like, fully real. It's real in the sense that we make it real and we allow it to be real. But if we stop giving it so much potential
and
power, that's all these people fucking have.
Yeah.
If
they
we
don't have
stop,
anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we stop, like, allowing them to have that control, then they won't have the control anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, it reminds me of war. Mm-hmm. It's like, maybe you have the biggest army, but if that army is not fighting for you and is fighting against you, then you have nothing.
Exactly.
And it's so obvious and it's so easy to say it, but I think, like, we have to say it and we have to continue to say it. And, like, once we stop saying it, then we're just gonna lose it. Exactly. I think we have to keep saying it and we have to get more people to say it. And the more people that say it are going to start believing it. And it's going to become more of a widespread concept and philosophy. And I don't know, maybe one day we can actually use that power that we all hold and do something good with it.
Be the bell you wish to see on Earth.
I'm speechless.
You're welcome.
I think that's the perfect way to end it. That's all we needed to say.
That's all we needed to say.
So, with that,
bye! Thank you for listening to Bell on Earth, the podcast. We hope that your minds have been expanded and your pussies have been opened.
Be sure to rate and follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
This podcast is brought to you by Free Studio Productions. It's hosted and produced by Cassidy and Casey Bell. Big thanks to our executive producer, Derek Benton.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for all of your content needs. See you later, haters.